And good evening. We begin Top Story tonight with that high-stakes meeting as the White House warns Russia could invade Ukraine at any moment. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, you see him there meeting with his Russian counterpart in Geneva. The 90-minute conversation ending without any resolution, but the two did agree to continue negotiations. However, Moscow continues to amass tens of thousands of troops at the border with Ukraine, surrounding the country on three sides, including north through Belarus. In Ukraine, soldiers conducting drills near annexed Crimea as the country prepares for a potential war. And our Richard Engel got rare access inside a Ukrainian cyber defense agency where they are working to prevent another type of attack and online invasion. The Ukrainian government hit with a crippling cyber attack just last week. President Biden in Camp David this weekend as his administration continues damage control on comments he made about a U.S. response to Russia. Let's get right to NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell, who leads us off from Geneva.
Tonight, Secretary of State Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov had a critical meeting to diffuse tensions over Ukraine, with 100,000 Russian troops on the border and counting, and President Biden warning a Russian invasion could be imminent. A denial today when we asked Lavrov.
Is an invasion likely, as President Biden suggested?
He said, I don't think so. Blinken spending the last 48 hours in Ukraine and Germany, cleaning up after President Biden came under fire from allies for suggesting the U.S. and Europe are divided over how to respond if Russia launched a, quote, minor incursion.
If any Russian military forces move across Ukraine's border, that's a renewed invasion. It will be met with swift, severe, and a united response.
Tonight, the U.S. demanding Russia pull back its troops from Ukraine's border. Russia demanding written concessions, including barring Ukraine from ever joining NATO. For the U.S., a non-starter.
Do you have any commitment at all that they will stop the aggression that you say is standing in the way of any positive agreement?
Let me say this. Based on the conversation today, Andrea, look, I believe that there are areas where, on a reciprocal basis, we can address some of each other's concerns.
With Russia now surrounding Ukraine on three sides, including now on the north from Belarus, what does the Kremlin want from the crisis?
Well, that last question is probably best addressed to President Putin, because, in a sense, only he really knows.
Andrea is joining Top Story tonight from Geneva. Andrea, we know that President Biden is convening his National Security Council at Camp David this weekend. What happens next?
Well, they're going to go over options. They are now referring to the paper, the answers that Lavrov has been demanding. And they said, OK, we're going to give you a paper, but they're calling it a non-paper. There was a briefing on the Secretary's flight home, heading back to Andrews from Geneva with a small pool of reporters, and they wired it to us so that we could see, exactly what they were saying about this. They're going to give them some options, and the options are going to probably be the kinds of things that they've been telling us publicly about areas in which the two countries can agree on missiles. We have no intention of putting nuclear missiles in Ukraine. So it's very easy to say we're not going to put missiles in Ukraine, but they're not going to agree on what Lavrov wants, which is a paper somehow changing U.S. and NATO policy that goes back decades on NATO expansion. And that is what Lavrov is looking for. So I think what's going to happen is they'll come up with the policy, the president will sign off on it, they'll agree on next steps, what they're going to send back, work that over, send it to Russia. There'll probably be another one of these meetings somewhere, maybe here in Geneva, between the foreign ministers, and then they're not ruling out a summit between the two leaders, because nothing's going to really be decided until Vladimir Putin decides what he wants to do.
So, Andrea, on that point, you've covered a lot of these sort of diplomatic talks over the years and things that work out where they can actually negotiate and there can be peace, and then when talks break down and there are invasions and there are wars. What is your gut telling you about this one?
This one is worse than almost any that we've seen. We've seen disputes over missile placements in Europe and huge protests and European populations up in arms and U.S. populations up in arms about Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, colloquially known as Star Wars, dismissively known as Star Wars. But this is different because Vladimir Putin has, incredible numbers of weapons. They're the only other nuclear superpower, real superpower in the world besides us. And he has a different vision of Russia's future. He wants to see the former Soviet Union somehow recreated. That's what all the experts are telling us. That's from my own observation, how Putin really wants to get back to the empire that he knew growing up as a KGB top leader in East Berlin. And since the Cold War, that's not going to happen. So he could face a bloody insurgency in Ukraine, but he could do a lot of things short of an invasion that would be really aggressive and really hard to counteract, including cyber. We have things we can do, but there are a lot of things a lot of damage he can do to Ukraine and to us, frankly, on cyber, which will cause us damage, economic damage, weaken the alliance. And we also already see real divisions among the NATO allies. They have different interests, different geography, and different energy needs. And Russia is, as some once remarked, a giant gas tank masquerading as a country. So a weak economy, real problems at home, but there is the personal power of this totalitarian leader, Vladimir Putin, and he doesn't have an exit strategy. Admiral Stavridis, the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, told me earlier today that he's painted himself in a corner. And that's why the president correctly said, we don't know what he's going to do, but having put all these troops there and refusing to back down, he's got to do something. That's what's so ominous. Tom?
Andrea Mitchell for us tonight from Geneva. Andrea, we appreciate it. That threat from Russian troops and tanks isn't the only kind of attack Ukraine is preparing for. Our own Richard Engel got an inside look at how Ukraine is getting ready for the possibility of a cyber attack, and has more on that tonight.
If Russia invades Ukraine, this small office in Kiev would quickly become an unlikely front line. In fact, they're already at war here. This is the Ukrainian government's cyber defense center, built to protect against Russia's specialty, a combined martial art mixing an invasion of ground troops and tanks with hacking. I met the deputy director, Viktor Zora.
What is your expectation? That Russia would try and shut down the government, would attack infrastructure like the power and water? What are you preparing for?
They can try to do everything they can.
A week ago today, the Ukrainian government was hit by a massive cyber attack it blamed on Russia. It temporarily shut down dozens of government websites. This office fought it off. But Zora says cyber attacks are rising quickly.
If it went from this to this, do you think it's going to get worse from here?
Actually, it's a bad signal for us, but it's also a signal to become more strong.
Russia says it had nothing to do with last week's cyber attack. Ukraine's cyber command says that most of the attacks it blames on Russia so far have been aimed at government computers, trying to delete files or control them remotely. Tom?
Richard Engel from Kiev tonight. Richard, thank you. Another major headline, the FBI formally closing the investigation into the murder of Gabby Petito. Officials announcing that her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, had claimed responsibility for her death in his journal before taking his own life. Petito's body was found in September, kicking off a weeks-long nationwide manhunt that ended with the discovery of Laundrie's body in a nature preserve near his parents' home in Florida. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Goss joins us now. Stephanie, when Laundrie was found dead, a lot of people were worried that the answers about what happened to Gabby would die with him, but that doesn't seem to be the case tonight.
No, it doesn't, Tom. And it seems like he wrote it all down. According to the FBI, when they found his remains, they found a number of things, a backpack, a notebook, a gun, all belonging to him. And they say in that notebook, he claimed responsibility for killing his fiancée, Gabby Petito, only 22 years old. This story really gripped the country. You had these two engaged young people in their 20s who drove cross-country with each other before getting married. And it was only Brian Laundrie who returned to his family's home in Florida. That kicked off that search for Gabby Petito. Eventually, they found her remains near Grand Teton in Wyoming. Then they went to Brian Laundrie, and they couldn't find him either. That launched a manhunt for him, and eventually his remains were found in that Florida preserve near his family. The FBI closing the case today, but also saying that this is a tragedy for anyone who loved these two young people. Tom?
All right, and again, that case has been closed. All right, Stephanie, thank you for that. When we turn now to the weather, 12 million people remain under winter alerts as temperatures across the South plunge. That deep freeze dumping frigid rain and leaving dangerous ice in the region, up to half an inch in some places. Emergency alerts issued as officials brace for potential power outages, tree damage, and hazardous travel. Emily Aketa again on the weather tonight for us.
Tonight, another winter wallop pummeling the southeast as a January freeze in half the country sends temperatures plunging 20 degrees below this time of year's average.
I need all my layers up, even the mouth and nose.
12 million are under winter alerts, a rare ice storm taking aim at weather-weary residents in the Carolinas, with dozens of utility crews preparing for the worst.
We hope that things go smoothly and that we don't get hit too hard, but, we're prepared in case.
Just days ago, tens of thousands there lost power amid freezing temperatures. The 1-2 punch slickening roads, sending even an ambulance sliding near Raleigh. The treacherous commute feared beyond Earth. NASA delaying the return of a SpaceX Dragon cargo ship due to inclement weather. The storm system bringing a taste of winter as far south as Brownsville, Texas, which recorded only its 5th winter storm warning ever this week.
Describe how cold today is. It is like you're stepping into a freezer. It's very uncomfortable.
More than 60 million Americans started the day with wind chills at 0 or below. Temperatures that could give you frostbite within minutes.
It's cold enough that you got to watch your step everywhere. It's, iced up all over the place.
From piers in New York to billboards in Texas, water fast turning to ice. Wind chills dropping to -24 in Minneapolis, -7 in Boston, and 4 degrees in the Big Apple. A merciless cold that forecasters warn is here to stay through the end of the month. Several governors have already declared states of emergency as temperatures are anticipated to drop even further in the nighttime hours. That will make for worse roadway conditions. Plus, more snow is on the way for different pockets of the country, including hard-hit Virginia and North Carolina. Tom.
Emily Aketa for us tonight. Emily, thank you. With more snow and ice on the way, we want to bring in WNBC weather anchor Dave Price in tonight with a look at the weekend forecast. And Dave, we have to get ready for the storm.
Yeah, we're not talking about the usual suspects at the west or the northeast with this winter weather. We're talking about an area from Georgia all the way to Maryland. 12 million people impacted by these storms, a combination of rain, ice, and snow moving through the region. Let's talk about what we see right along the coastline tonight. Rain, but you don't have to go too far inland to see that sloppy mix and what will be accumulating snow. So that's what we're dealing with over the next 24 hours. This low pressure system moves out, ice and snow develop overnight, and significant icing in the Carolinas. It's going to create a travel nightmare. So how much ice are we going to get? In some locations, upwards of ½ an inch. You only need about 1/10 of an inch to create real problems in and around the roadways, but you're going to get much more than that as you head between Wilmington and, let's say, New Bern. Now, inland, you're still going to get plenty of messy weather in the form of not only ice but snow. Some locations we could see upwards of 3 inches of snow on the ground, and these are not areas used to clearing that much. As we talk about that storm we have in check right now as we head into Saturday, but bitter cold temperatures in the northern tier of the United States with international falls-like conditions as you head into sections of New England. 22 below the wind chill as you wake up Saturday morning. Moderating conditions, though, as we head into Sunday. So things do get better, Tom.
It is going to be really cold out there. Dave, thank you. Now to the opposing realities of COVID in the U.S., with the country likely to pass 70 million confirmed cases. Areas first hit hard by Omicron are seeing signs of a slowdown, but in parts of the South and the West, the number of new cases is still off the charts. This as the CDC released new data showing that a booster shot is 90% effective in preventing hospitalizations. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer takes us inside the hardest hit hospitals in the most impacted state.
Today, as the CDC cited new data saying booster shots are at least 90% effective in preventing hospitalization, less than half of Americans who are eligible have actually received one. It comes as rooms, gurneys, hallways, and triage areas outside hospital lobbies in states like California face a crushing wave of COVID cases.
I have 32 patients down here waiting for a bed.
Hospitalizations here in the hardest hit state have recently doubled at Sharp Grossmont in San Diego.
On a daily basis, it's loud and chaotic.
Dr. Julie Phillips treats patients who are still overflowing into field hospitals and are among the 27 who are regularly admitted from Ambulance Alley, a steady conveyor belt of the seriously sick.
Are you surprised that things are this bad?
You know, I want to say no, but deep down, I was hoping we'd never be back here again.
Just a few days ago, this hospital was so overwhelmed, they tried to divert patients elsewhere. But when every medical center was in the same situation, they had to simply open more floors.
But the overworked and undermanned staff are seeing signs of hope. Nationally, hospitalizations may soon plateau, even as some regions reach record highs. In New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, cases are in a steep decline. But in Oregon, Arizona, and California, the numbers are off the chart.
She's going to get the ABG if you want to.
It's hard to see any end to the misery for nurses losing patients.
We're sending somebody to the ICU, or we're seeing someone pass away every shift, every day.
William Adams almost became one of those statistics.
Paramedics kept me breathing until I got here.
After choosing not to get vaccinated, he sits in isolation with regret.
It brings you right to the brink to tell yourself you don't want to live.
Adams knows he's lucky to be alive. A patient just a few doors down, struggling to breathe, needed help from a rapid response team. For some, living with COVID means facing death day and night.
Facing death night and day. All right, Miguel Almaguer joins us now. Miguel, as you mentioned, COVID numbers are rising in some regions. We're seeing it fall in others. What type of forecast can you tell our viewers about?
Well, Tom, experts seem to agree that the surge in cases nationally should start to significantly decrease in the days and weeks ahead, but hospitalizations typically drag behind. So hospitals like that one we just showed you likely won't be out of the woods for some time. Tom?
Miguel Almaguer for us tonight. Still ahead, the deadly explosion, an entire town leveled after a truck carrying explosives crashed overseas. New video of the devastation. Plus, man versus bear. The shocking moment a homeowner wrestled a black bear to save his small dogs. What happened next? And the outrage tonight after a teacher, look at this, was photographed taping a mask to a student's face. How the school is responding. Stay with us. Top story, just getting started on this Friday night. All right, welcome back to Top Story. We turn now to the continued battle over masks in schools. The debate has been causing controversy all over the country. Now one district under fire after a teacher taped a mask to a student's face. And a parent in Virginia saying she'd even bring a loaded gun to school because of the mask policy. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard has a look at some of the extreme cases.
Tonight, this photo of a teacher taping a mask to a student's face. The latest incident in the heated debate over mask mandates. We don't know what happened in the minutes before or after that image was taken. The photo circulated on social media in the Philadelphia suburb. The school board now responding.
First and foremost, I would like to extend an apology on behalf of the district and the board of school directors to the student who was involved and to his family.
The mother of the student issuing a statement addressing the growing controversy. It was read by the district's attorney at the local school board meeting.
This situation has taken on a life of its own. How this has evolved is exactly what I wanted to avoid.
The heated debate isn't just happening in Pennsylvania. During a public comment period at a Virginia school board meeting last night, comments from one parent put school administrators and police on high alert.
My children will not come to school on Monday with a mask on. All right? That's not happening. And I will bring every single gun loaded and ready to, I will call every...
That's 3 minutes.
The police say the mother has since apologized and that the incident remains under investigation. The school district responding to the incident with a statement, violence and threats are never acceptable or appropriate. Earlier this week, Governor Youngkin signed an executive order saying that parents are allowed to choose whether their kids wear masks in school.
As we battle COVID, it's parents that should decide the health measures taken for their children.
But already, some counties bucking the governor. Loudoun County School Board voting to keep its mask mandate in place per CDC guidelines.
I want my kids to be able to continue to go to school. They've been masked all year, and they've been able to stay in school, knock on wood. Both of them have been happy to be back, been able to learn.
In Missouri, just hours ago, the state attorney general, Eric Schmidt, filing dozens of lawsuits against school districts across the state to stop mask mandates, tweeting, "The cavalry is coming, #no mask mandates."
Vaughn joins us now in studio. And Vaughn, it's not just Missouri that's filing lawsuits, correct?
Right. The Missouri Attorney General filing lawsuits today against 35 school districts. But just this afternoon, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey announced that he and the state of Arizona are filing lawsuits against the Treasury Department, which threatened to take away funds, COVID-19 relief funds that were sent to Arizona. But the governor in these last months has refused to send that money to schools that require masks or that shut down because of outbreaks. Again, these are the types of lawsuits we're seeing from these Republican states.
All right, Vaughn Hilliard for Top Story tonight. Vaughn, thank you. When we come back, to the rescue, the 70-year-old woman pinned under a car. The moment officers lifted the vehicle to save her. And the streaming wars comes to Top Story. Stocks tumbling for Netflix and other streamer services today. What's leading the drop, and could it be a sign the market is oversaturated? Stay with us. All right, back now with Top Story's newsfeed. We start with some incredible video. The man caught on camera fighting off a black bear. A home security camera in Daytona Beach, Florida, capturing the massive bear entering a screen porch. The man then gets on the ground, wrestles the bear to try and save his little small dogs that he had there. He begins to block the door with furniture. The bear does run away, and the homeowner escaped with very minor injuries. A group of Delaware officers rescued a woman who was trapped under a car in Newcastle. Take a look at this. Body cam footage shows the 70-year-old pedestrian after she was struck, her arm and leg pinned under the wheel. The officers lifting the vehicle high enough and then pulling her out from underneath. She was taken to the hospital where she is recovering tonight. And the new mayor of New York City will take his first paychecks in crypto. Eric Adams says he will take his government-issued pay and convert it into Bitcoin and Ethereum using cryptocurrency exchange Coinbase. In a statement, Adams says he hopes to make New York City the global capital for cryptocurrency. And two passings to note tonight. Legendary rocker Meatloaf has died at age 74. His album Bat Out of Hell became one of the best-selling albums of all time. No cause of death was given. And comedian and actor Louis Anderson has died at the age of 68. The three-time Emmy winner was known for his work in film, TV, and game shows, as well as his stand-up career. His publicist says he died in Las Vegas from complications related to cancer. We want to turn our focus now to the streaming wars. The market's reacting strongly today to disappointing projections coming from Netflix, the streaming giant with one of its worst days in a decade. Shares plunging more than 20%. That's roughly $48 billion in losses, a figure larger than the market values of Delta and Best Buy combined. The dip coming after Netflix released its discouraging subscriber outlook, estimating it will add just 2.5 million new users in the first quarter of 2022, well below the nearly 4 million it added at the start of 2021. And it's not just Netflix. Roku, Comcast, and Disney stocks also down today. Disney, of course, the operator of Disney Plus, Comcast, the operator of Peacock. All of this leading to major questions about the future of streaming. Joining us now to break all this down is CNBC media and tech reporter Alex Sherman. This is something he covers for CNBC. So, Alex, this is really a pretty shocking number, something you just don't see from a company like Netflix, especially since the pandemic. So what exactly spooked investors so much?
Yeah, it's worst day in a decade, roughly, down more than 20%. The main thing that spooked investors, I think, was that number you mentioned, the 2.5 million new net adds number for the first quarter. That was well below some analyst estimates, which I saw that ranged from about, let's say, 4 million to 7 million. So that was a significant a miss there. But there's a bigger story, I think, than just the one quarter. And that's that for years now, Netflix has been a huge success story because the general narrative has been people are canceling traditional cable for streaming services like this one. And of course, Netflix was the leader in the streaming world. So all the growth was going to Netflix and all the investors were following along and enjoying the ride. But the miss in the first quarter, I think, has maybe spooked some, which is also why you see a number of the other media companies down today that you mentioned, Disney, Comcast, et cetera, that maybe the streaming narrative, sort of the streaming wars that has driven all these streaming services may be changing a little bit. And it may be changing in the way that it's possible that even that story now is maturing. Maybe the growth, all the growth that has been in the streaming wars is potentially capping out a little bit. In other words, we may be reaching a limit to the number of people in this country and around the world that want to pay up for streaming services. And I think that's a question that we'll find out the answer to in the months to come.
That could be one take, right? But people are still cutting the cord at a pretty alarming rate. They're moving to streaming. I think one thing that's being missed when we talk about the streaming wars is that, yes, there's Disney Plus, there's Netflix, there's Peacock, but there's also things like Pluto, there's things like Tubi, there's things like YouTube TV that sometimes don't make it into the discussion. So my next question to you is it getting too saturated out there? Are there just too many outlets for people to subscribe to?
You know, it's funny. I would say the answer to that is maybe. And for the first time that I can ever remember, Netflix sort of acknowledged it as well. In fact, I can read you, there was a line about halfway through their shareholder letter, and it's just this little clause. It says, while this added competition may be affecting our marginal growth some. That's it. That little thing. That is about as bold of a statement as I have ever heard from Netflix acknowledging that the other streaming services may finally be cutting into their growth a little bit. Remember, Netflix just announced a price increase about a week ago in the United States and in Canada. And Netflix is now the most expensive, if you go by their standard plan, of any of the major streaming services out there. So if you are now becoming budget conscious and you have all of these other options out there, the free ones like you mentioned, Paramount Plus, HBO Max, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, Hulu, maybe now you're starting to think, you know what? There are so many choices out there. Maybe I'll lop off the most expensive one. And yeah, I've had Netflix for years. And yeah, Netflix was always my streaming option of choice. But perhaps, finally, there's so much competition out there that as people get more price sensitive, as Netflix continues to raise its prices, maybe that's actually eroding growth for the first time for Netflix.
Especially as people bundle all the things they're subscribing to, it's starting to add up to what a cable bill would have been before. Finally, I know that gaming is a big part of this dynamic when it comes to streaming. Talk to me how you think this plays into Netflix's future.
Well, it certainly could become a big part of it. I mean, Netflix was very bold in its comments at its earnings call right after they announced their earnings results, saying, look, we want to be best in class. We want to be a world leader in offering video games in addition to our huge streaming TV and movie content. We hadn't really heard that from Netflix before. I think they sort of dipped their toe into video gaming. They only offer 12 games as part of their service today. But what we heard was that they are going to license larger gaming IP that a lot of people have heard of, they said, as part of their service. So you've got to expect that 12 gaming number is going to go way up this year, next year. And of course, the idea here is that because all of the games come with the service for no additional charge, it's another reason why you would subscribe to Netflix or stay with Netflix. Now, the other side of that is maybe that too is some acknowledgement that Netflix itself sees the streaming part of its business finally starting to come back a little bit in terms of growth. Now they need to offer this other thing to get investors excited because the general streaming wars narrative perhaps is getting a little bit cold for the first time.
Alex Sherman from CNBC for us tonight. Alex, we appreciate that. Time now for Top Stories Global Watch. We begin with the devastation in Ghana after a deadly explosion. New drone footage shows homes and other buildings leveled after a delivery truck carrying explosives crashed into a motorcycle and detonated. Nearly the entire town, you can see it here, destroyed by the blast. A massive crater, look at that, in the ground left behind. At least 13 people killed and dozens more injured. And in Liberia, nearly 30 people, including children, are dead after a stampede at a church. A group armed with swords reportedly rushing at worshipers as they left the church. The crowd then running over each other to get away. The West African nation now in a 3-day period of national mourning. The Red Cross was calling in to help the victims. Okay, and now let's turn to the Americas, where we take a look at stories from the U.S. and across Latin America. This week, a gruesome discovery near the Texas-Mexico border. 2 women found murdered. The couple's remains found inside trash bags on the side of a highway in the city that was once known as Mexico's murder capital. NBC's Priscilla Thompson has the disturbing details. We do want to warn you, some of what you're about to see may be difficult to watch.
tortured, shot, dismembered, and left in those trash bags on the side of a highway. That's what police say happened to a couple in a Mexican border town. Officers in Ciudad Juarez stood guard over the gruesome discovery Sunday. The victims, identified by officials as 28-year-old Noemi Medina Martinez and Tanya, known by many as Yulissa Ramirez. Reportedly last seen visiting family the day before the harrowing discovery. The married couple leaves behind 3 children. The murders happening in one of the most dangerous cities in the world. Ciudad Juarez averaged 4 homicides a day in 2020 and more than 1,400 in all of 2021. 9 out of 10 were drug-related. While drug-related homicides are rampant, so too are attacks on LGBTQ people.
3 possibilities: organized crime, the women's bodies were dismembered and they were dumped in plastic bags in cartel style, the rampant homophobia in Mexico, or femicides.
Yet the state's attorney general insisting that the heinous killings weren't a hate crime.
La justicia plana para todos, igual, en un esquema de igualdad. Y vamos muy avanzados en la investigación. Son diversas líneas de investigación, pero crimen de odio no es.
Protesters disagree, taking to the streets in Juarez demanding a thorough investigation amid growing fear the couple may have been targeted for being lesbians.
Exigir a las autoridades estatales, en este caso la fiscalía, a la gobernadora, pues que hagan algo para esclarecer los hechos, saber pues si tuvo que ver con una cuestión de odio por ser mujeres lesbianas.
Several agencies are now investigating the murders, officials say, and no motive has been given. Hate crimes are one concern, femicides another. The murder of women because of their gender is a persistent problem in Mexico. Many of those deaths occurring in northern Mexico.
Juarez has a history since the 1990s of femicides. There have been hundreds of women killed in this fashion, either by serial killers or organized gang criminals.
In a nation where nearly 95% of violent crimes go unpunished, some worry those families may never know why.
These were LGBTQ women in a city like Juarez. Do you think we'll ever know why this happened?
The odds are very low because of the tremendous impunity in Mexico. Only about 1 or 2% of murders are ever successfully prosecuted.
And with that, Priscilla joins us now in studio. You know, you mentioned there in your report that many people are fearful this case will never get solved. What's the sense you get from family and friends? Because it sounds like some government officials say they're investigating.
Right. They say they're investigating. And I think when it comes to our family and friends, that's part of the reason why we've seen so many people out protesting, moving quickly to bring attention to this case and demand a thorough investigation. And experts there tell me that making this a high-profile case in a city where day after day people are being murdered could be the difference between whether this case is ultimately solved or not.
Okay, Priscilla Thompson for us tonight. Priscilla, thank you for that. Coming up, fight for justice. A Connecticut woman raped inside her home. Years later, her attacker is identified as a family friend. Her fight to keep him behind bars on an all-new Dateline. Andrea Canning joins Top Story right after this break. If it's Friday night, you know it's Dateline. And tonight, the shocking case of a Connecticut mother who was raped in her own home. In the weeks that followed, investigators accused her of lying and even threatened to arrest her. NBC's Andrea Canning has that woman's years-long search for justice and her fight to keep her attacker behind bars.
John Palumba was due home on Sunday, September 12th. He had no idea a nightmare awaited him.
I knew John would be crushed.
Donna had gone to the hospital for a sex crimes examination. Her rapist's DNA collected. Now she steeled herself to tell John what had happened.
And he assumes everything was okay at home.
Right.
And then he walks through the door and his life changes in an instant.
Absolutely.
Almost 3 decades later, John Palumba still has trouble talking about that day.
And it just, you know, it hurt me that there's nothing I could do. I was angry. I was very angry. I mean...
Did you feel any of that guilt that, oh, I shouldn't have gone?
Absolutely. I felt that I let him down. I wasn't there. That's what hurt, is that you just felt like you let your family down.
It hurt even more because John had always been vigilant, super protective.
I used to tell her all the time, make sure the doors are locked. If I'm going out for a walk, make sure the doors are locked.
At first, the police made slow progress. Donna went over her memories of the assault again and again, hoping to retrieve details to help them. The investigators were stumped by one question in particular. How did the attacker get into the house? Donna told them the doors were always locked at night.
There was no broken windows. The door wasn't jimmied in any way. So it was troubling. It was troubling to them, and it was equally troubling to me.
Donna believed her attacker was a stranger, but as the days went by, she and John began to wonder about that.
We kind of had a feeling that it was someone that we knew.
Why did you have that feeling?
Because I was never away. And so somebody would have had to known.
Dateline correspondent Andrea Canning joins us now. And Andrea, this Dateline hour is a little different than the others because there's no murder, but there is a horrific attack. It's also a story about a marriage, isn't it? Who are the Palumbas? What kind of people are they?
The Palumbas were dressed in everyday, average couple, good people, raising their family, in a great town. And Donna Palumba is raped by a masked intruder. And this mystery would go on for decades as they tried to figure out what happened to her and who did this. And ultimately, who did it was the biggest shocker of their lives.
And this was truly a wild mystery. The attack happened back in 1993, a very different time when it came to sexual assaults. What happened when she first reported this to police?
She at first was believed, and then everything changed. And suddenly she was not believed. The police officer told her that they had irrefutable evidence that she made up this story, that she was in fact having an affair and was covering up her rape. This affair by saying she was raped, which was completely untrue. But this is the narrative that they went with. And they actually told her, we're going to read you your rights. So this just, really infuriated her, of course, and set her on a path that would change her life.
This had to be so painful for that family. Donna's attacker was finally found 11 years later. Why did she decide to speak out now?
Donna decided to speak out because she had been known as Jane Doe in her community. She was afraid. She was embarrassed. I mean, so many emotions that were going through her. And she finally decided, you know what, I need to go against this police department and tell the truth and let people know who I am. And I need to use what happened to me to help other sexual assault victims. And so this thing that happened to her, this horrible sexual assault, it really changed her life, and it made her a stronger woman in the end. It was really her calling for helping other people.
All right, Andrea, thank you. We look forward to all of that. You can catch the full episode tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern over on NBC.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.